Hi, good morning, everyone. How many of you have been to Albania? How many of you know where Albania is? All right, good. Well, the last time Albania made waves in the United States was during a 1989 Simpsons episode. Bart is behaving very badly, and they need to figure out a way to bring him in line. So they discovered there exists this project called an exchange student program. So they send him to a farm in France. But then they realize, Homer and Marge, that the exchange program works in a way that you also have to accept a student. So they have this draw. It turns out to be this student from communist Albania. At the time, Albania was the most isolated country in the world. They'd shoot you for coming in and shoot you for going out. So they find out that there is this kid coming from Albania to Springfield. And as Homer is waiting for his new adopted son from Albania, he's asking Lisa, the intellectual in the family. And he says, what are 3 things I should know about Albania? And Lisa says, well, Dad, and you have to understand, they have this really scary flag with this double-headed black crow, eagle they call it. So that's the first thing you need to know. And the second thing you need to know is that their currency is called Veliaj. So it's not the dollar. They use a different currency in Albania. And the third thing you need to know is that Albania's main export is furious political thought. Because nothing else was being produced, a bit like North Korea today. So a lot has changed since. I became mayor in 2015, and the reason why I wanted to talk to you is to maybe open up a bit of perspective on how what mayors are dealing with in other countries in the world, and sometimes maybe compare notes and see what you can do on the dime rather than comparing to Western countries or where money is not an issue. So I'll tell you about my first day in the office. I asked them after I was elected to take me to the roof of the city hall. And I wanted to see, my job description. And this is what I look at. So after 1989, when the Berlin Wall collapsed, and so did the communist system in Eastern Europe, there pretty much was a time of lawlessness. No urban planning, no zoning codes, no master plans for cities, no land usage coefficients. So pretty much everyone took on their own and started to build something. Part of the reason is that because of communism, the Communist Party decided where you went to school, where you lived, who you married, in some countries, including Albania, how many kids you had, what type of furniture you bought, and what type of city you lived in. So sometimes people were sent to remote fake towns, cities that had no roots, that had no organic creation, mostly because of security reasons. We were obsessed, paranoid, the communist dictator, about an enemy that never showed up. So that's why we created all these fake towns in the borders that in 1989 and 1990, when communism collapsed, these people said, what are we doing here? We have no history, we have no roots, our grandparents didn't live here, so they all moved to the capital. So now the capital is home to 1/3 of the population, and half of the economy of one country, just one city alone. So you look at this and you understand that clearly there was complete lawlessness when it came to urban planning for the last 15, 20 years. And then I looked at traffic outside of the office. And I said, oh my goodness, during communism, our main export was furious political thought. But now our new trophy in capitalism is the car. Owning a car is a way to show to your neighbor that you made it. You're not a poor commie anymore. Look, you have a Mercedes parked right in front of you. You may not have enough to buy books for your kids and the right to clothes, but you have a car. And it should absolutely give you a better standing in your community. So not necessarily a means of transfer from A to B when A to B is further than a mile, but mostly a trophy to put in front of your house, to go to Germany and bring a Mercedes, or to go to Italy and bring a Fiat, or to go to France and bring a Renault through this wave of immigration in the early 90s. So having a car clearly created a lot of chaos. We went from a city that had 200,000 people in 1989 and only 17 cars from the Politburo, the head of the Communist Party, and everybody else just walked around with nothing to do, to a city that now has 1 million people and 170,000 registered cars, plus cars that come from other towns because it's the capital and you have stuff to do. So over 200,000 cars a day. So we have now more cars than people in 1989. And then the other thing I looked at from my rooftop, at the city hall was the clock tower. And it shows 5:37. Not because that was the time I was there, but because it was stuck 5:37 for about 20 years. So at least twice a day it was right. But other than that, the rest of the day, we were stuck in time. And I think this is where you say we're stuck in time now, in the present, but what about the future? So I was sworn in the end of July. Actually, I was sworn in 31st of July. So I'm being sworn in next week for my second mandate. But I realized that I only had 1 month before school starts. So we said, look, forget the past, it's a mess. Show me how does the future look. And I said, well, Mr. Mayor, let's take a tour in the kindergartens and the nurseries. So that will give you an idea what the future looks. And this is what the future looked. All damp. They look like prison cells in a third world country. Completely out of standard. No place for kids, completely usurped with spaces that people had occupied. Not only occupied public space like parks, but occupied public institutions like nurseries and kindergartens. And then we said, well, look, we got 1 month. We're not a rich country. But any country or any city that produces such a huge percentage of the GDP, in our case 50% of the GDP, should also have 50% of the solidarity, 50% of charity, 50% of contributions. So we decided one day to call up, instead of running a tender for money we didn't have as the city was bankrupt, we decided to implement an extreme house makeover, but the city version, not the reality show version. So we invited the top 100 companies, and I said, I don't know what you were doing with the previous mayor, but here's a file for you. Each of you adopt one kindergarten or a nursery, and you have exactly 1 month to do it. It will really operate like that reality show. It worked wonders. In the beginning, people were saying, oh, Mr. Mayor, you know, you've lived abroad, you've lived in America. In Europe, we don't do this. We're not big into charity. I used to live in Grand Rapids, actually. I'm happy to see my friend, the mayor of Grand Rapids, here. And I said, well, you know, we never find out unless we try. And funny enough, everybody responded. So we had 100 construction sites that had 30 days to complete state-of-the-art kindergartens. And then they looked like this, only a month after. And then we started to introduce play. Play as an important learning exercise. And then we started to introduce gardening. And we're not going to eat from our kindergartens. They look like prison cells. Well, not if you take care, not if you show love, not if you reconnect kids to nature. So some of our kindergartens grow their own food, like salad, and they have their own playgrounds. And then we decided to create our own city council for kids, because we found out there was such power in kids. When you run for office, and many of you have run for office, and you ask people, who wants change? Everybody raises their hand, they say, I want change, Mr. Candidate for mayor. And then when you come into office, and you say, who wants to change? Everybody says, have him or her change first, because you know me, I'm a bit difficult. But for kids, this doesn't matter, because kids have no party membership. Kids believe no dogma. They have no strings attached. Kids don't have an agenda. If they like something, they say. If they don't, they also say it. And I will explain in a minute why this is important. Because I have a lot of advisors in those early days who say, Mr. Mayor, remember, you're a politician. You should worry about taxpayers and voters. And kids don't pay taxes and definitely don't vote. And I said, well, let's find out where this takes us. And then we started building the state-of-the-art schools. I was telling some of our friends that fixing out kindergartens, nurseries, and schools is paramount if we want to start a conversation about the future. And we decided to invite some of the top leading worldwide architects. And we took this example from Mayor Fajardo in Medellin, where he found out that one way to reinvent all the favelas and all the calles of Medellin after the Narcos period was to build state-of-the-art schools that served as community cathedrals. It's acupuncture in a city where the whole community comes around, not only as places where you park kids for 6-7 hours a day, but 24/7 spaces where communities can come together in some of the poorest neighborhoods in our cities. And then we said, well, what do kids do after school? They want to play, right? So I asked our Parks and Recreation people, I said, how many playgrounds? At the time I was not a father, I'm a father now. I said, how many playgrounds do we have in the city? I said, 0. I said, what? A city of 1 million people, the youngest capital of Europe, at least 300,000 children or kids within that age range, under 16, and you're telling me we have 0 playgrounds? And I said, why don't we build the biggest playground in Eastern Europe? And they said, wow, that sounds like a great idea, let's build one. So we decided to build one. And the first day, when we were trying to put up the construction site, we had this violent protest. People were angry. Some were the opponents who we had just defeated, and some were activists who said, you're destroying our park if you're going to put toys in there, because this is for grown-ups, this is not for children. And I said, well, look, this must just be one day of hysteria. Eventually, they will understand that this is okay, and we will move on. Well, so was the second day. Members of parliament from the right wing. I know you have issues with the right wing in this country, but any similarities are purely coincidental. Coming up with guns. And I said, this mayor, the socialist mayor, is making fun of us. He wants to turn the city into a playground. We're serious people. We said, if you were serious people, your clock wouldn't be stuck for 4 years. You'd be on time. But then we found out that this was actually serious business. We had, in 100 days of building this playground, we had 78 violent protests. So the orders were clear. So look, they destroy every day, we build every day. They destroy every day and we build every day. They knock it down and we raise it up again. And then in the end they're saying, Mr. Mayor, we want a referendum. I said, are you kidding? I plan to build about 100 playgrounds. I'm not going to have a referendum for every playground. This is what I promised in the campaign. Now it's time to actually get it done. I said, we will have a referendum. And you have your right to protest. Sometimes your right to protest goes overboard and it actually vandalizes our construction site. But one day the referendum will come. And this is what the referendum looked like. This is basically kids showing up. And some of the critics were saying, but there are no kids. Look at this space, there are no kids. Yeah, I said, if you have no space for kids to feel safe, for them to play, for it to be clean, for their grandparents to also join, all ages, all abilities, for them to sort of feel that their kids are playing within their eyesight, of course there'll be no kids. But build it and they will come. And this was our referendum. And then we went on this craze and we said, look, every month of our tenure, we will build one new playground. So I'm happy in the last 50 months, we've built 50 playgrounds as spaces for kids to play and be in nature. But some people may say, even in this crowd, yeah, but Mr. Mayor, this is easy, build the playgrounds. But this is purely cosmetic. What about the mobility challenges that we saw on the first slide? So I don't know if he's here, but a good friend and mentor of mine, Gil Peñalosa, came to visit me on my first days in the office. So we're having a little brainstorm on what we can do and the story of the playgrounds. And we decided to cross the street. And this is what the street right in front of my office looked like those days. It took us about 20 minutes until a cab driver realized, oh, look at that kid, he's the new mayor. Maybe we should let him pass. So we were able to cross the street, and then we decided, what if we play this experiment and we turn downtown just for one day in a car-free space? And we said, let's see who shows up. In the beginning, it was a wave of hysteria. Facebook and Instagram went nuts. Here's a socialist mayor trying to take our cars away. So our PR people were saying, look, Mr. Mayor, good experiment, but a complete PR disaster. And I said, it out. Let's wait until these kids go home and see how the conversation develops. So as people were having these dinner table conversations and giving all kinds of compliments to the mayor, these kids were saying, but Dad, it was not so bad. Remember that bike you bought me that I hadn't used for 3 years? This was the first time I could use it in the heart of the city. And remember, that skateboard that I could never use anywhere? This was the first time. And remember that kite? I could, for the first time, fly a kite. And then we said, let's do it one more time, next month. And let's take the risk. And then we said, let's do it every week. And let's take the risk. And then we said, once people are doing yoga in the middle of a roundabout, I said, let's do it maybe more often and do weekends entirely. And then let's get to see how kids can play. And then we said, once these kids, the kids that I mentioned earlier, who don't vote, who don't pay taxes, who don't have party membership, these were the kids that turned out to be revolutionaries. And they were radicals planted in every household who constantly... It's funny what makes Americans laugh. The word radical is a perfectly normal word in Europe. So these radicals in every household who are doing basically the spokesperson of the municipality. We didn't pay a firm, we didn't ask for a lobbyist, we didn't get a PR group to organize this, we didn't do focus groups or polls. It was mostly kids insisting every day that this was actually working. And the only focus group we did was to ask people about car use. And we asked people, said, what is the most important thing in your life? Like everywhere in the world, people say, my family, of course, my kids are the most important thing in my life. And then we said, if kids are the most important thing in your life, would you agree that you spend most of your income on raising your child? Mr. Mayor, don't offend me, this is a no-brainer. Of course I do. I said, well, let's do a little calculation. And we did. We found out that the average family in the city was spending 33% of the income on raising a car. A metal box that needs to be parked, needs to be fueled, needs to be insured, and needs to be serviced. And only 22% on raising one child. So clothing, food, and books and materials for school. Then we realized, and then people started to educate themselves and find out that this craziness about the car charging them more than their own child was a bit out of control. They felt betrayed. They felt someone had changed their values without asking their permission. And then we started building this downtown, and we said, look, now that we have at least common consensus, you never have full consensus, and I'm sure in your cities there are always a minority group of hysterics. They are trying to silence the majority by doing all kinds of craziness. And just like with the playground, so happened with the square. But in the end, this is what it looked like. The largest playground, the largest roundabout in Europe, where we calculated 120,000 cars a day would go and make this huge spin in a Soviet-style roundabout before they actually went to any other part of the city, turned out to be the best public space for Europe in 2018. And then we said, not only take the cars away, but how can we introduce the concept of an urban forest right in the heart of the city, where most people need to go outside, out of town, to find some peace. How about people come into town to find a moment to stay in the shade, to play dominoes, to sit in a park, to do the petty gossip of the neighborhood? And it turned out that this is a constant sight that we have now every night. And instead of encouraging people to leave town to find clean air, we actually invite people to gravitate to the heart of the city to actually find species of trees and of plants and of flowers that otherwise they would find in a remote mountain of the country. And this is what it looks like during the summer if there's a movie night, and this is what it looks when the kids decide to get wet, and this is what the afternoon stroll, the typical Mediterranean giro, as they say in Italy. And then we started to ask questions. After we finished with the square, what is the favorite activity that people do in the Mediterranean? Food. People love to eat in the Mediterranean. I see even in Denver, everything is either Italian or Greek because, you know, once you put their name, you're guaranteed to see some good food. And then we said, but if this is such an important, if the food experience is such an important part of our psyche in the Mediterranean, let's find out where people eat. So we look at the market, and this is a market when I was 10 years old, I used to sell dried figs. And I found out that I'd become mayor and the market had not changed one bit. It still looked like a third country market. And then people were selling in the streets, and the same type of hysterics. And these hysterical groups is a mobile group. They go to everything the city wants to change. You are laughing because they're the same people in your city. Everything you touch is like a mobile, you know, it's not like a rent-a-car, but a rent-a-mob to take to every place that is changing, right? And then they started to say, you cannot touch this, okay? So we let it go with the playground and with the square, but this you cannot touch. And I said, why? Because it's national heritage. I said, national heritage, you know, what is national heritage? Is it the rats? Is it the mud? Is it the dust? Is it the tents? Is it the corrugated roofs? Is it the asbestos? What really is a national heritage here, other than your fixation that things cannot change? So this is what it looks now. With a little money on infrastructure And we said, because it's such an important, you have to find out what is the important thing in your psyche, in your city. But because food is such an important part in the Mediterranean, going to the market is not just about buying food. Going to the market is also about showing up for life, to meet your neighbors, to take your selfie, to be in the marketplace for your drawing class from school, to maybe have an overnight concert, to celebrate a birthday, to welcome friends that are coming for the summer holidays. And then we started to realize that building this acupuncture helps, but it's definitely not the whole city. And I think what we realized that in poor countries, acupuncture is probably the best way to go. I mean, everybody likes a full body massage, but if you can't afford it, a few needles that can touch a few nerves and a few spots that are emblematic and symbolic to the city are absolutely helpful. And then we started to put some rules of design for the future. Whatever happens in the past, we worked with a Peruvian urban planner, Hernando de Soto, who realized that you cannot knock down all the illegal buildings. In some of the developing countries, it's much better to legalize them, give them property papers, so that all this capital enters the market. But whatever lessons we learned from the past, we should adopt them in the future. So we said, if we're building new boulevards, how about if we build boulevards where sidewalks does not sound like the word sidewalk, basically walk on the side, which is a diminutive thing. So streets are built to transport cars and people are on the side. No. Streets or infrastructure is built to transport people. Some people may be in the cars, some people may be in the buses, some people may be in the bike, and some people may walk. Everybody pays taxes, so why are 20% of the public who owns cars, at least in our case, owning or running or using 80% of the infrastructure that everybody else pays with taxes? What if we did some sense of equality when it comes to using the taxes in the same way the users of mobility in the streets pay for them? So we decided to build this new boulevard, and then we said, what if we build the nicest, instead of sidewalks, main walks, and have pedestrians take as much space as cars do, rather than walk like goats in a little path, beside a building. And this is the result that we saw. And if you build, and in some days we have to close the street because people want to take over also the space of the cars. But the result is that if you build with people in mind, rather than with cars in mind, I think it makes a whole difference. And once our urban planners, with Gil and a few others, were trained to think of how to get people to move rather than only cars, it made a huge difference. Now, this idea of the orbital forest, we work with a great architect called Stefano Boeri. He's famous, if you've been to Milan, of towers called Bosco Verticale, the vertical forest. And I think it's being touted now as sort of the new modern way to build towers, to implant trees in the tower and make sure that it's sustainable. And we realized that one way we can use this idea, instead of a vertical forest, is an orbital forest. One way to contain sprawl, and one way to realize that we can't go forever and pollute every agricultural land, and we eventually need to put some boundaries. Now, I don't want to mention walls in this country because you're big in walls these days. Different kind of wall. A wall that is permeable, that is conceptualized as a linear park, but also a wall that signs that the city will stop here. We will not kill any more agricultural land. Not everybody can afford to have a single family house. So we will look at vertical growth with density, with a concept that we say within 500 meters you should be able to find all the amenities in your borough, anything from the barber to the grocery store, to the pharmacy, to the bakery, to the coffee house. But then we said, how are we going to build these 2 million trees? Even a rich city cannot afford 2 million trees. So then we thought, well, what if we start this little game, just like we did this extreme house makeover? What if every kid in Tirana, all these kids that helped us do these amazing things, planted a tree for their birthday? And what if this really started as a game, but maybe it became contagious, and every kid wanted to plant something for their birthday? Well, it worked miracles. We have now planted already over 250,000, so we're well underway of planting these trees. No one wants to be the uncool kid in the class who has not planted a tree yet. So it has worked wonders into kids not only planting their tree, finding their GPS location, and making sure that their tree is watered and that they take care of it throughout their lifespan. I could go on forever, but I see my seconds are running down. One thing is how to use technology in the city. I remember my first day, and this is the last joke before I finish. I get this letter, and I said, I'm the mayor now, so I should really find out what people write and what people want. So I opened this letter, beautiful writing. Someone had gone to the post and stamped it, and he says, I'm a war veteran from Second World War. I'm, over 80-some years old. And I said, Mr. Mayor, I really need to inform you that the neighbor in the second floor is having an affair with the neighbor on the fourth floor. I said, why do I need to know this? I'm not the Iranian religious police. It's a free country. People can sleep with whoever they want. But why are you writing to the mayor? And then a guy who's been in the city for a while says, well, during the communist period, the mayor was also the head of the Communist Party. So he's also in charge of the city morale and the communist morale and people behaving properly. So he still feels he needs to spy, he needs to tell the party about all the immorality in the neighborhood. And I said, but how can we turn this vice into a virtue? How can we build a small app where people can take pictures of the potholes? Because they're clearly putting the effort. If someone is writing this beautiful handwriting, going to the post office, which is across the street, so the letter can cross the street to me, that's 2 hours of human life spent on useless information. What if they spend, all these people who are retired, who are veterans, who have time in their hand, who have energy, who still care about the community, clearly not the same things I care about, but they show a sense of commitment, can use this app so easily. So we developed an app, cost us zero money, and every day, instead of hiring 1,000 inspectors who go around and check on things that are broken, we get 20,000 people who do this for free and who report on every street light that has been burned, on every tree that has been vandalized, on every manhole that has been broken that needs fixing. And it gives people an empowerment to see a message come back, not with a picture that they send that it was broken, but with a picture that we sent as a push-up that it has been fixed. And I think trying to treat people as part of a cohort, as part of a management team, where everybody feels like a mini mayor for their neighborhood, for their street, I think works miracles. And all this energy that we sometimes realize that retired people have a lot of time in their hand. This is not the Cold War anymore. People live much longer. They have a lot of energy. So when we say all ages, all abilities, we also mean the elderly. And the fact that we build playgrounds to also accompany spaces for the elderly, for grandparents, for grannies who are knitting, or for granddads who are playing domino as they keep an eye on their kids, is, I think, the most magnificent urban glue that keeps these communities together. I could go on forever, but in this country, you have a tendency to tell people to go back where they came from. If they provoke too much. So, I'm just joking. I am just joking. I don't want to get your political senses offended, but I'd be happy to stay afterwards and talk, and then definitely want to extend an invitation for you to come and visit. And I really hope you have a wonderful conference. And I look forward. We have another event tomorrow with the International Forum of Mayors. I'd encourage a lot of our American audience to come and see how a lot of this innovation is coming from cities that have minimal budgets, but with a lot of creativity, getting a lot of stuff done. Thank you very much.